This call is from a federal prison.
I was raised to believe that the American dream was about pursuing happiness. As much as I hate to admit it, my happiness occasionally counted on the freedom to consume various substances. But it was the legal substances that changed my life forever. Now I question the motives that go into creating our modern drug laws, and the people who have been elected to protect us have become some of the people I fear the most.
And when it comes to drugs and alcohol, just say no.
We have allowed the government to declare a war on drugs because the majority of Americans haven't known any better. And they haven't really understood that all of this is a massive deception. It's a massive profit scheme.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
They can't even keep drugs out of the prison system. You know, they have guys in prison that ODs and things of that nature, even in the home.
What's happening here in America is that our government is inadvertently supplying the hard drugs to the people in this country. Then they're putting the people who use them in this country in jail.
Fixated on terror, most Americans have forgotten they are fighting another war.
Watch a nigga say, "So a eyeball" back to your mama Sunday, crying.
But from its inception, the drug war has become the longest, most costly and destructive war in American history.
The drug war is a perfect continuing example of why we will never win the war on terrorism, because it captures the ineffectiveness of the U.S. government, and it captures the fact that it's being used against poor people and not against the people who benefit most from drugs, which are the bankers that launder the money.
We don't send nicotine addicts to jail, and we don't send alcoholics to jail. We shouldn't send drug addicts to jail.
Oh my God, do you mean they'll legalize marijuana and you can buy heroin at 7-Eleven?
People have to realize that most of our history, we didn't have federal laws against the use of drugs.
$50 billion a year at the local, state, national level, clogging our courts year after year.
I mean, people fighting the drug war need to articulate that what we're after is not blanket legalization, but decriminalization.
Why in the world do we have millions of innocent young people wasting away in prison when the big people who are committing these huge, atrocious crimes are getting away every day?
My own personal opinion, I think the jail cell is better than the rehab.
This year is the 30th anniversary of the Drug Enforcement Agency. It was created by Richard Nixon in 1973, and Richard Nixon is really the creator of this drug war from 1971.
With every passing day of this drug war, the battle line seems to be getting harder and harder to see. And yet it's almost impossible to believe that the same rules apply to everyone.
Well, a lot of us are very uncomfortable with this notion of a war on drugs. So what we attempted to do was articulate a very different concept, which was viewing the drug issue as a cancer affecting American communities.
You used the wrong word. You said war. If this is a war, we would have solved the war and won the war. This is the greatest country in the world. When we go to win a war, we win it.
We got more drugs today than we did 10 years ago, and that's got to tell you that there is something bigger that's not being shown.
In 1972, when Richard Nixon started the war on drugs, the federal budget allocation was $101 million. Going into fiscal year 2000, the federal budget allocation was $20 billion. Yet there were more drugs in the country in 2000. They were of better quality and they were less expensive than they were in 1972. What's wrong with that picture?
We arrested 14 people targeting high schools selling heroin.
We almost totally eliminated the production of coca.
The drug warriors love to talk about illegal drugs, but what drives the motives to legalize certain harmful and equally addictive substances?
Money. Money controls this whole movement. You have a group called the Partnership for a Drug-Free America. Well, first of all, of course, we don't have a drug-free America, never have, never will. But who are the funders? Who are the main funders, source of funding for the Partnership for a Drug-Free America? Of all things, the tobacco industry and the alcohol industry. They are drugs. They are mind-altering, sometimes addicting drug-free America indeed. But why do they do that? They spend huge money to reinforce the distinction between legal drugs on the one hand and illegal drugs on the other.
I had lost 2 family members and a best friend in a very short span of time to alcohol, cigarettes, and legal prescription drugs. So fearing that I could be next due to my own struggle with addiction, I wanted to find out why the drug war seemed to be such a huge failure. When Nixon started the drug war, I was far too young to understand its implications. Living in white Texas suburbia, growing up in the 60s and 70s, I consider my childhood to be pretty average. An older sister and brother, a stay-at-home mom, and a father who ended up being a top executive of a big corporation. For us, the drug war was something that had no bearing on our lives, and even though my parents were both heavy drinkers, they never crashed a car, never lost a job, never missed a mortgage payment. On the contrary, my parents were pillars of responsibility, symbols of the post-World War II generation who had earned the right to live and drink the American dream.
There has never been a society in the history of mankind, as long as mankind has walked the face of the earth, that has not had some form of mind-altering, sometimes addicting drug to use, to misuse, to abuse, or even get addicted to.
Unfortunately, my brother Kurt didn't inherit my parents' ability to drink hard liquor, and when combined with some of the illegal drugs that the other members of his rock band used, he would often become violent. When I was about 6 years old, Kurt gave me a hit of acid, promising me that I would see green monsters.
You get down, man, with the LSDs, man, and the cocaines and the marijuanas and diet pills, you know, and start controlling your mind, start controlling, you know, other things in the atmosphere because of your intoxication results, you know.
As it turned out, it was only an allergy pill, but shortly after, Kurt's behavior landed him in the state hospital, where all the doctors convinced my parents that acid and marijuana had caused my brother to become a paranoid schizophrenic.
The drug problem is devastating to a lot of people. Drugs do not discriminate, they do everybody.
When Nixon created the DEA, they started the National Drug Scheduling. Schedule number 1 being the most dangerous drug with 0 medical value, down to Schedule 5 being the least dangerous with medical value.
We all know what happened to Nixon, Nixon's history, but we all know that he used the demonstrators to divert attention from his illegal bombing of Cambodia.
Look at the context in which these drugs erupted into the culture in the 60s. We were conducting a vicious war in Southeast Asia.
Where did this policy come from? Unfortunately, I have conducted an inquiry into this, and I have determined that drug prohibition laws came for reasons of racism, empire building, and ignorance.
I mean, in Nixon's mind, I think drugs were associated with not liking Nixon.
Nixon's new drug scheduling put marijuana in the most dangerous category, side by side with drugs like PCP, crystal meth, and heroin.
People in the United States didn't have any idea what marijuana was, but it began to be associated with those Mexicans.
In an attempt to keep me away from drugs and my sick, addicted brother, my father enrolled me into the Boy Scouts. It was at the acclaimed Philmont Scout Ranch that I had my first exposure to getting high.
Clearly, going back to high school for me,
we were not going to be able to lock up 80 million Americans for having tried illegal drugs.
If the DEA decided to crack down on all pot smokers and forced everyone to take a piss test, enforcing this law would require building prison walls around almost every city in America.
I just see such a corollary between the war on drugs and prohibition of alcohol. And we tried the prohibition of alcohol, and I don't think anybody in this country wants to return to that. And yet alcohol is unbelievably destructive for a small percentage of people who imbibe.
Prohibition was an attempt by ideologues, similar to the ideologues that we have today, to impose their moral values on the rest of the country. And what they discovered was that it creates crime waves.
My name is T. Rogers. I am the CEO of Sidewalk University and the founder of SELF, Survival Education for Life and Family. I also helped start the Bloods on the West Coast.
Seventh Street, Parkside Rider, acting 20 gun, Parkside Rider, Harlem Killer, fuck crap, dub day anyway.
Get your ball in my face, huh?
No camera, you don't want no camera? No camera time?
Blood used to mean my brother.
Exactly. From the Vietnam War.
Yeah, from the Vietnam War.
Being a drug dealer doesn't mean that you are a gang member. And being a gang member doesn't mean that you're a drug dealer. But the war on drugs in itself, in essence, it gives you the power to sell drugs in a particular neighborhood.
Drugs come from poverty, which inspires crime, which inspires a loss of confidence, a loss of pride.
Instead of war on poverty, you've got a war on drugs, so the police can bother me.
The administration had a war on poverty, and that seemed to dissipate. It seems to disappear at all. I mean, it was gone. And then all of a sudden, up popped this thing called war on drugs.
After getting out of the mental hospital, my brother was moved to a halfway house deep in the ghetto. Here, Kurt was introduced to crack cocaine. The people running the halfway house drove Kurt to the pawn shop where he pawned his guitars worth over $2,000 and traded for $100 worth of crack. I was always told that crack was a black man's drug, but now my own brother was hooked.
Drug prohibition for cocaine was basically passed in order to protect white women from black males. And the history will document this.
Talking to people in the ghetto, one dealer's name always came up when talking about crack's popularity. Freeway Ricky Ross became known as the Walmart of crack. Ricky's story has become as legendary as Tony Montana and Scarface, but with an even more bizarre twist. Ricky, who is currently serving time in the Texarkana Federal Prison, is scheduled for release in 2013. The prison denied me access with a camera, so I started interviewing Ricky over the prison payphone.
You know, a lot of people don't know what it's like to come in the house and there's nothing to eat. You know, to go to a supermarket and walk through the store and eat out of the cookies and things of that nature just to have something to eat. Cocaine came along, you know, and gave me a new horizon, I would say.
There's a new epidemic. Smokable cocaine, otherwise known as crack.
I remember clearly one day in the late 80s, every single news network simultaneously running an identical news alert about the new, incredible, powerful, unbelievably cheap drug that was to sweep the nation.
This is crack cocaine.
Soon, every single black person living in the ghetto would sell his own mother for another hit of crack cocaine. It was like watching a strategically engineered ad campaign. Talk about perfect product placement. Did we mention it's cheap and strong and very addictive? It's only $5 now, so stay away from it.
Let there be no mistake. This stuff is poison.
Crack cocaine epidemic. Crack cocaine epidemic.
Few street-level dealers have ever reached the legendary status of Freeway Rick, with distribution that rivaled many Fortune 500 companies.
Freeway Ricky Ross was a young, aggressive, savvy, streetwise marketer who started selling cocaine, and then suddenly some major sources opened up for him.
At the height of Rick's operation, he had over 40 full-time employees in Los Angeles alone. He had cook houses, cash counting houses, rock houses, decoy houses, and even a house he lived in.
Cooking was always our most vulnerable and our most time-consuming thing to do. Usually you could put it in like a big Samsonite suitcase. You could put 100 keys just about in one of those, or maybe 2 of them. So that's what we normally cooked every night, like 100 kilos.
Rick shares some good down-home cooking tips about rocking it up.
Well, the way we did it is I basically was a chef. You know, I did all the stirring. I would tell the guys to mix. Like one guy, he would be standing there, and I would tell him, add more baking soda, pour more water, you know, that type of situation. So it was more, yeah, it was like an assembly line.
I know this is nothing to joke about, but Rick is your all-American opportunist. And as the media told us, crack was now the big new opportunity.
You know, we had houses where you basically would go up to the window and it would be served right out the window, kind of like the way McDonald's does it, I guess. Because we had houses in so many different locations. Basically, you know, I wanted a location. I wanted it to be convenient for the people, you know, where they wouldn't have to drive for. It was kind of like marketing, I guess you would say.
The gangs evolved, and the gangs were a great business venture. They're basically marketing tools. That's really what they were. And they were quietly promoted behind the scenes. They got a lot of money. They got a lot of power. They fought for drug turf.
Everyone's working for somebody else right now, legally or illegally.
In order to film people selling and using drugs, we would have to go undercover. So we met up with an old friend of mine who was living very close to the most infamous spot in all of Los Angeles. Yeah, put that one back in your like funny little case I made you.
All right, this is San Julian right here. This is fucking like, this is the spot, dude. Damn. I walk down San Julian, we will get all that. Dude, you meant. Yeah, all that is fucking, this is Tent City right here. Damn. This is San Pedro right here, which is like San Pedro, Grand, all this shit. This is just nothing but drugs. This is considered a neutral territory to gangs, like all different gangs, Bloods, Crips.
Should we just look for a place to park?
All right.
No.
Yeah, but you should put that camera down.
My friend Mac Lindsay agreed to pose as a homeless guy and film people smoking crack in Skid Row.
Dude, if these people knew what we were doing, we would be fucking dead.
Yeah.
I mean dead, not even like beat up, we'd be dead.
One Thanksgiving, my brother came home from a halfway house. My aunts, my uncles, my young rich cousins were all there. No one could have been prepared for the moment Kurt pulled out a crack pipe at the dinner table and started smoking rock during the pre-meal prayer.
There's a thing called a bell. You get your bell rung. That's when you hit the pipe and you hold it. And you hold it for so long that something inside of your head, it rings.
After the first hit, you're going on that's the highest you're going to really get. That is the highest you're going to get.
Is that what they call ringing a bell? Is that somebody else said? Did you say?
After that, you have an increased appetite for cocaine. And you want more, and you want more, and you want more. And you tell yourself, I'll just take $10 or $5 and buy me a little hit to sustain myself, to hold myself off. But after you get that little hit, you want more, and you want more, and you want more. Then that's called chasing the rock.
Drugs can obviously cause horrible addictions, but the drug war creates black markets, creating an even more dangerous addiction for money.
Well, and I became addicted to the money and also the power, too, I believe. You know, to be in charge and to have people look up to you and talk highly of you.
Big names like Freeway Rick going down. People actually want to be like him because they don't think about drugs, they just think about the money.
But what about those people whose lives are still affected by the Los Angeles crack epidemic?
Someone that wants to get in a program, someone that wants to get away from this lifestyle, easily can do it. Easily can do it. I mean, if they can just overcome the addiction.
Many people in Washington will tell you that the crack epidemic ended in the late 90s. But according to Sergeant Lou Daigle of the Los Angeles Police Department, crack sales are stronger than ever.
Basically, on San Julian, you can come and everyone sell it. I mean, everyone will either act as a hook for you and bring you to a buyer. A lot of the buys go on intense. We've even had intelligence that gangsters will come, gangbangers will. I mean, basically every gangbanger comes down here to make money.
Right.
Okay, they come down from the inner city, they come down from East LA, they come down from everywhere, all the different rival gangs, and very rarely actually is there a shooting between gang members.
Although Freeway Rick remains locked up, many people still blame him for crack's easy availability.
One time, I went over to this lady's house to drop her off some drugs, and it was the look that the little boy had in his eyes, as if, man, you taking food out of our refrigerator. We're not going to have anything to eat. And I thought about it, I said, man, I was putting him in the same position that I was running from. I basically was running from poverty. That's basically how I got tied up in the drug business, because I never wanted to be a drug dealer, when I was growing up. At one time, I even wanted to be a police officer or a firefighter.
I think the drug war is going to be lost. You can't win a drug war by prohibiting things that can be made in your bathroom with stuff bought from a grocery store.
Back when I was in college, we used to cross the Mexican border to buy pharmaceutical speed. We thought it was strong, but it was nothing compared to the crystal meth of today. Sergeant Daigle spots a man smoking meth out in plain sight. He may have been tweaking a little too hard to realize that he was using directly in front of the police headquarters.
What about the methamphetamine side?
Yes. Blackouts, psychosis, delusions, cutting my wrist, things like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Seeing things, demons and stuff.
Pretty realistic?
Very realistic.
Today, the DEA claims that crystal meth, or ice, is the new epidemic, replacing crack, because of how long it lasts and how cheap it is.
Oh, meth is much better. Meth is, you get more energy, you can do more things, you can, it lasts longer.
Flying over the Mojave Desert, it's hard to imagine that a modern-day drug epidemic is taking place in rural white America.
What are you in here for?
What am I in here for? I'm in here for possession of dangerous drugs.
Which was?
Which was methamphetamines.
Methamphetamines? Were you selling or just?
No, I'm just a drug addict.
Just a drug addict?
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, do you think being in here is helping your addiction?
Left, right, left, right, left.
I had a real bad coke habit, and I felt like methamphetamine saved my life, man, because I didn't have to use coke anymore. I fell asleep at the wheel pulling out of my parking lot at my house, and I woke up to the police being there, and underneath the seat of my car was 11 cents worth of methamphetamine, and they convicted me of that.
In Phoenix, Arizona, a single man has created a kingdom from fighting meth and other illegal drugs. With 4 landslide victories under his belt, very few sheriffs have enjoyed the job security of Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
What is this, a documentary on drugs?
You either love him or hate him, and in Phoenix, if you hate him, you keep it to yourself.
Don't touch that, or it's electric, you'll die.
Oh, okay.
We don't screw around here. This isn't Texas. All right. The reason I'm the toughest because see these guys, right?
Yep.
Pink, where's your pink underwear?
I got them.
Just see them. How come they're fading?
They don't got no new ones for me. I asked Mr. Arpaio, they just don't got them.
Could we just start with you just like telling me your name and who you are?
I gotta tell you in front of these guys, they don't know who I am. Joe Arpaio, Maricopa County, Arizona Sheriff. This is the largest tent city in the United States, probably in the world. I would almost bet half of these guys are here for drugs. You see this? They could only mail postcards, did away with their envelopes, and on a postcard, that's me. We put the inmates in the dogs in the air-conditioned jail, and these guys are in the hot tents. It says that while inmates live in a hot desert tent city, rescue dogs live in air-conditioning comfort, right? Let me sign this?
Yes, please.
Everywhere I go, I sign these things for these guys. I spent 32 years fighting drugs around the world. I was a director in Mexico, South America, had offices in Panama, worked with General Noriega, had offices in Argentina. I was the only federal agent in the Middle East. Now we have armies out there. My job in Turkey, I lived in Turkey, was to stop the French Connection. And we did stop the French Connection. When I was a director in Mexico, we arrested the top guy in Asuncion.
Although he and his men still arrest people for crack, a newer drug has long since taken the lead.
We have a big methamphetamine problem right here. You can't blame Mexico for methamphetamine when we seize 50 laboratories right here in this county.
What is it about crystal meth?
Methamphetamine is easily made. You can make it anywhere, in a motel room, in a car. That's one reason.
Methamphetamines, I mean, it's all chemicals, you know, and it's the one that, it's the epidemic of Arizona. I know that for sure. Phoenix and Mesa, Tempe, Chandler, all the surrounding areas. I know it's an epidemic here.
Is it a sign of the times that the newest drug can be cooked up from common substances found at hardware stores and pharmacies? During the 1920s prohibition of alcohol, bootleggers profited by cooking moonshine, a very dangerous homemade alcohol.
In Prohibition, the government forbade legal booze. People created moonshine.
Is crystal meth the modern-day moonshine?
What we ought to be doing with regard to methamphetamine is we ought to be engaged in a real educational campaign to tell people just how dangerous methamphetamine is.
Don't you think the drug war could be kind of held responsible for the fact that meth has become so popular, the fact that it's harder to get cocaine into the United States because of the drug war? Now we're giving a rise to synthetic drugs?
No. These guys will use any drug they can get. That has no bearing on it.
Can I ask them, who would rather do cocaine or speed?
Tweak.
Speed.
Meth.
Speed.
You guys do speed?
Why do I think it's become so popular? I mean, it keeps you going. You can work a long time. You can stay awake. Have great sex.
What's it come down like?
What's it come down like? I don't know. I never came down.
Heroin makes you nod and get in traffic accidents. Marijuana makes you sit on your couch, and speed puts you in the fast lane.
That's your opinion.
As governor of the state of New Mexico, half of what we spend on law enforcement, half of what we spend in the courts, and half of what we spend in the prisons is drug-related.
Self-made millionaire Gary Johnson shocked the citizens of New Mexico when, after being re-elected to a second term, denounced the drug war and tried tirelessly to introduce harm reduction strategies.
Former Governor Gary Johnson's in this film.
Who's he? What?
He was the governor of New Mexico, trying to legalize drugs for 8 years.
Oh yeah, that's why he's not the governor anymore.
Well, he was 8 years. But what do you think about him? What do you think would happen to America if drugs were legal?
Well, you know, that guy, in fact, if I knew he was going to be on your camera, I probably wouldn't even be talking to you. Because that's a defeatist attitude, this guy. That's right, New Mexico. You should never have a defeatist attitude and give up because you say you can't solve a problem. So let's give up on bank robberies and let's make everything legal.
The way I look at it basically is that we have gotten to where we've gotten today, and I think it's because of politicians, and drugs have become the easy boogeyman to put all blame on.
I'm the only politician, if you want to call me that will tell it like it is.
The judge ordered me to go to treatment, and I'm not able to go to treatment, so this is what I'm getting instead. Chain gang and county jail.
Are you afraid you're going to fall back into it when you get out?
I'm afraid I may if I don't get into a drug rehab right away, like within the first 12 hours of my release.
Are we going to ever eliminate methamphetamine use? No. But can we reduce it? Yes, and we can do that through education. But that doesn't have to include locking people up for its use.
When you look at 2 million people in prisons and jails across the nation, about 60% are in there for drugs or drug-related crime.
And when it comes to federal prisons, I know that that number is much higher because of federal mandatory sentencing.
This isn't a prison, this is a jail. The prisons are the country clubs. That's where some of these guys could end up, and I'm sure some. Anybody been to the Department of Corrections? Which one you like better, here, the jails, or the state prison? What? See? These guys plead guilty quick so they can get to prison.
I was raised believing that incarceration was expensive to the taxpayer. It was not in anyone's best interest to lock someone in a cage unless it was absolutely necessary. In the mid-1980s, a law was passed that allowed privately owned corporations to build and operate prisons.
I'm a real advocate of private prisons, having privatized half the prisons in New Mexico. And the reason for doing that is the same goods, same services at a third less the price.
Have we reached a point of building so many prisons that the purveyors are now looking for ways to keep them all full?
Here's the way a private prison works, okay? You pay somebody to build a fancy cage. Then you fill it up as far as you can get it, which is pretty full. Full of people that, the people that built the cage get paid $40,000 or $50,000 a year to just keep in the cage.
You have corporations like Wackenhut, you know, they just changed their name, Corrections Corporation of America, that house prisoners, nonviolent drug offenders. As a matter of fact, I think 60% of the increase in prison population under Bill Clinton, which was like 1 million people, of the 60% of that new prison population are nonviolent drug offenders.
Now, if you've got 5,000 people in your cage and you're being paid $30,000, $40,000 a year for them, that's a lot of money. And if you can, on top of that, use them as your private property, as chattel property, that you can then make do work or produce things that you get paid for on top of that, what a great deal. Now, where I come from, when you transform a person into a piece of property, that's called slavery.
Not far from Bakersfield, California is the small town of Taft, once home to a thriving oil industry. But like so many oil towns across America, the oil finally dried up. Like many bankrupt towns, a private prison stepped in to save the day. The Taft Correctional Institution is owned by the GEO Group, formerly known as Wackenhut. Wackenhut changed its name after a storm of bad publicity.
The GEO Group is the leader in providing diversified services to government agencies around the globe. Our global expertise in outsourcing includes the design, construction, financing, management, and operation of jails, prisons, and special purpose institutions, and immigration and detention centers.
They trade their stock on Wall Street based upon the number of people that are in jail. If that isn't sick, if that isn't the best definition of sickness in a society, in a culture, in a civilization, I can't tell you what is.
Serving time in the Taft Federal Prison is actor-comedian Tommy Chong of Cheech and Chong. Trying to get into the privately owned prison to interview Tommy was not unlike dealing with any other major corporation. Months went by as they kept asking me to jump through endless hoops, and if I didn't know any better, I could swear they were doing everything possible to get rid of me. But Tommy wasn't just an icon of drugs. Sitting in prison, he was now a symbol of things to come with the new conservative fever sweeping the nation following 9/11.
The transmitter on the ground truck. You guys are from Texas, right?
Yes, Austin, Texas.
Austin, oh, no wonder. Old Willie Town, huh?
Tommy Chong arrested for pot, right? No. Tommy was targeted by former Attorney General John Ashcroft, whose Operation Pipe Dreams entrapped the 65-year-old actor. Tommy's son was using his dad's face to sell bongs on the internet and was baited into shipping a glass pipe to a county that prohibits them. In his attempt to shut down the paraphernalia industry and send a message to Hollywood, John Ashcroft made an example out of Tommy, proving that even a rich movie star is not untouchable for the DEA.
I'm Tommy Chong of Cheech and Chong. It's like a royal title. The privatized prison business is big. It's a slave labor market. We get these little jobs and we get like $15 a month, low end. It provides employment for depressed rural areas. So you get a place like Taft, you know. If it wasn't for the prison, there would be no industry here. You know, the oil industry is gone, long gone. There's nothing else here, you know, except maybe the ground squirrel industry. Conviction rate is almost 100%. And people that are doing the longest time here are the ones that had a strategy, that went to court and fought it and lost.
Step up to the waterfalls. Yeah. Good off, fall in. J2.
You know what it did? I'll tell you what it did. It made me feel like a black guy.
Tulia was, for a long time, just another crummy little town in West Texas. And it's treated black people and Hispanic people in a real crummy way for a long time. It's not any different than towns throughout the South and probably in the Midwest. It's got a large church-going population. It's got a very tight-knit community of white people. And it's got a small outside community that's not even really a community of marginalized black and brown people.
I'm kind of the chief redneck out here because I am kind of prejudiced, and I admit it, and everybody is. You know, I'm not unique. I am unique in that I understand who I am and attempt to control that, which Christians are supposed to do. But any guy that puts his pants on one leg at a time and says he's not prejudiced, I say, come with me and I'll take you someplace and show you some people that you will be scared on your first impression.
Civil rights attorney Jeff Blackburn witnessed how the lure of lucrative drug war funding enticed an entire police force to make illegal arrests.
All of a sudden, overnight, there was this massive roundup, well-publicized, put all over the TV stations, where 1/10 of the town's black population was escorted in handcuffs to jail. We were told that this was the most massive rural drug conspiracy ever uncovered in West Texas, that it was due to the sterling police work of an individual cop named Tom Coleman, who was a hero. The Tulia newspaper ran, not an editorial, I'm sorry, it was a news story that was headlined, "Tulia Streets Cleared of Garbage."
When all the major media sources, including 60 Minutes, covered the Tulia story, they told of a lone redneck cop by the name of Tom Coleman who hated black people. But who was Tom Coleman working for? When you followed the trail of money, he was merely a pawn of a law enforcement policy that profits from making large arrests.
So there was this thunderclap arrest and sweep of the black community. It landed 46 people in jail, nearly all of whom were black. Then, of course, they quickly started getting processed through the system with court-appointed lawyers, with all-white jurors, and we began to get sentences like 99, 75, 320 years. Out of control, over-the-top, Texas, typical small-town sentences for drug dealers.
Yeah, I sat in jail for 5 months before my lawyer even came to see me. He told me, he said, only thing you can do for me, give me 25 to 99.
In the olden days, you had legal lynching. This was legal lynching on a whole new level. This was ethnic cleansing combined with the need to get grant money.
The problem in Tulia, and the problem with most of the task forces in the state of Texas, they're created as an entity, as a corporation that more or less stands alone. It's not in the chain of command of DPS or any state agency.
It's tempting to think of Tulia as just some rural, weird remnant of the distant Deep South past. The truth is, Tulia is the cutting edge of modern drug law enforcement.
And you got this task force out here operating like a pit bulldog or a Rottweiler that's supposed to be on kind of a leash, but it's running all over town trying to find any kid it can to bite.
Yeah, I know I was singled out because I was black, black guy, and the Spanish and the black we in big, big trouble.
Sergeant Lou Daigle receives a call about a naked guy walking into a restaurant and putting ice up his butt.
311 man is a man with no clothes on or exposing himself.
If the government really wanted to stop drugs from coming into California or into the United States, it could be stopped.
The name Sherm comes from people dipping Sherman cigarettes into vials of PCP.
It bothers me to no end that so many young people are on Sherm now.
Hey, Sherm was one of the worst drugs that I ever seen in my life. Saying somebody that used Sherm, whoa.
Your mamas will call your daddies when they call my daddy. I'll press him 1,000,000 times and color me. Mama, we black or white, color him blind. Money won't eat money. I'll see this shoe or get up a zipper. Mama said wash him hours later after eating.
I've seen guys get butt naked and run down the street.
Butt naked and wallow in the dirt and the mud.
I seen a guy get asshole naked. I seen a guy get asshole naked in the rain and hump on the ground like he was with a woman off of PCP. That about a bitch.
Church, well, pimp, and gore backwards. Sis or slapper. Off your asses, kids. Kids kill eggs on drugs, kids. Pop a firecracker, crackers. If you're Halloween,
We're going to go ahead and pick you up and we're going to put you on our gurney, okay?
Okay, we're going to say journeys to grannies, Jeezy's, Easy's.
All right.
Watch the please me clean up my mama's whores.
So I'm going to lift you up and put you on my gurney, all right? Just chill out.
Journeys with gods or devils with Jesus is as your mama said titties gotta squeeze theyself. Excuse t-shirts, they won't walk. Mama, I'm scared to wash my back. I got beat too much.
He's in custody right now for certainly under the influence of PCP, certainly for the vandalism. He's also probably for ADW against a police officer because he was throwing glass at the police officers. Once again, completely incoherent as drug-induced crime, really.
Right.
Sunny girls pray for God. We'll walk them for 5 minutes. Ears and titties.
When we came in, that was towards the original for the ice. He was trying to cool himself off.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, he was here naked.
I heard he was putting ice down up his butt and doing all kinds of stuff.
All around him and started throwing everything around.
Yeah. In downtown, the got voted in them.
No sane person will tell you that drugs like PCP or crystal meth should be made available to the public. But how do you stop things that people can cook up on their own?
People have learned that they can cook up drugs, and so they're experimenting now more. And I believe we will have a whole menu of new drugs, and these drugs will not be regulated because the government has driven drugs underground.
We've told kids that marijuana is just as dangerous as methamphetamine, and kids have tried marijuana, and they recognize that it's not a dangerous drug. And then they go and try methamphetamine, and, now we're back to kids and their understanding of these things. And, so many of them put methamphetamine then in the same category. Gee, if the government's lying to me about marijuana, they must be lying to me about methamphetamine also.
It's a ploy. Well, this drug money funds terror. It's a ploy.
Ploy.
A manipulation.
Ploy.
Drug money funds terror. I mean, why should I believe that?
Because it's a fact.
A fact.
FACT fact.
So you're saying that I should believe it because it's true. That's your argument.
It is true.
Since 9/11, the only thing that's really changed around here in my neighborhood are the attitudes of the police. You know, the gangs are now the new terrorists.
And how tough security's gotten since 9/11, it's like really like, you know, how the drugs coming into the United States now, how? I mean, you know, I don't have an airplane, you know, I don't have a car that's gonna make it with California plates to Mexico and back to Colombia. I can't even drive to Colombia.
Yeah, so it gotta be flown.
I don't have a boat.
It gotta be flown or shipped.
There's a great line in the movie Boys in the Hood where Larry Fishburne is saying, hey man, we don't grow it, we don't own any airplanes, we don't have any laboratories. How does it get here? Why does it get here? And that's a very good common sense approach that intuitively the people in South Central understood, that there was something much bigger than them that was moving the whole drug issue and the drug war.
My parents were staunch Republicans. Back in the 80s, the big concern was not terrorism, it was communism. The Iran-Contra affair was one of the biggest political scandals in U.S. history. Members of the Reagan administration, headed by Oliver North, engaged in the sale of arms to Iran. The proceeds from these illegal deals were being used to fund the Contras, a right-wing guerrilla group that Reagan referred to as his freedom fighters. The Contras were fighting the Soviet-backed Sandinistas for the domination of Nicaragua.
The Iran-Contra is very important in history. We have to remember the fact that Iran-Contra, its mandate was to investigate the sales of missiles to Iran.
Former DEA agent Celerino Castillo not only fought in the international effort of the American drug war, he also had the rare opportunity of carrying a camera and recording some of the regrettable actions of the DEA and CIA while they supported President Reagan and Oliver North's Contra movement.
George Bush Sr. came to Guatemala on January 13, 1986. And he approached me and asked me what I did there at the U.S. Embassy, what my job description was. And I told him I was a DEA agent working international narcotics investigations. And I told him, look, you know, we have gathered intelligence that the Contras are involved in drug trafficking down in El Salvador. And then he just smiled, shook my hand, and walked away from me. And it was then and there that I knew that my government knew that these atrocities were occurring.
They were so concerned about giving the guns to Iran and all that stuff. The question should have been asked about all that cocaine flying back over here.
In 1986, on American TV, we were all being fed a steady diet of,
we're taking down the surrender flag that has flown over so many drug efforts. We're running up a battle flag.
This scourge will stop.
But regrettably, back in Central America and in the jungle,
I remember down in Central America, we were refueling planes full of cocaine coming into the U.S., and it was a CIA operation being run by the White House.
At the same time, all of the cocaine from Nicaragua was flowing into the U.S., Freeway Ricky Ross was at his heyday.
The average week would at least be $2 to $3 million, almost guaranteed. Some days we would have $2 and $3 million days.
After Freeway Rick was arrested, an investigative journalist by the name of Gary Webb uncovered a link that connected him back to the Nicaraguan Contra movement.
So I read Dark Alliance. I got a copy personally from Gary Webb himself. And to read the book, it was fascinating for me, you know, to find out that I was connected with the CIA and all these high-powered people up in the government.
Ricky Ross was just lucky. He just happened to get a source who was connected to the CIA.
For a long time in South Central, the buzzword was that the CIA was selling crack. And I said, no, the CIA wasn't selling crack. The CIA was importing cocaine. Ricky Ross got it, turned it into crack, and he sold it.
According to Gary Webb's Dark Alliance, when Danilo Blandón was displaced from his home country of Nicaragua, he set off to America to raise money to aid the Contras in ridding his home from the invading Sandinistas. When Ricky Ross was introduced to Blandón, Blandón was in a position to create a pipeline of cocaine that he in turn gave to Ricky Ross on consignment.
Which I like the sound of that, you know, because I was always trying to get to the top anyway.
Suddenly, some major sources opened up for him. Danilo Blandón, Norwin Meneses, both of whom were tied to the CIA and the Contras, and Gary Webb did a masterful job breaking those stories and proving with documents that that was the case.
Whatever we were running in LA, it goes, the profit it was going to the Counter-Revolution.
I started doing a little research on my own, and I read a little bit about Oliver North and the Contras, because I never knew what the Contras was before.
There's ledgers of Oliver North and them actually transporting the cocaine to our country. There's film. Every piece of document that's possible.
Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. First-time dealer and former Crip Leroy Chico Brown was arrested with Rick. Chico walked into a DEA sting operation that was set up to capture and imprison Rick in trade for Rick's old partner, Danilo Blandone.
How could this be possible? And then we reading through the documents, and then that's when Gary Webb started explaining it to us, and we was like, everything came together now.
One of the most paramount moments, perhaps caused by Gary Webb's Dark Alliance, took place in November of 1996.
It was a monumental historic event. I mean, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency was coming to Watts to face the people.
Now, we all know that the U.S. government and the CIA supported the Contras in their efforts to overthrow the Sandinista government in Nicaragua in the middle 80s. Now, it is alleged the CIA also helped the Contras raise money for arms by introducing crack cocaine into California.
Deutsch felt he had to do something to try to deal with the outrage that was foaming all over the country at the time. And of course, it just blew up in his face.
CIA fights drugs. CIA does not encourage drugs.
I mean, it was actually one of the most monumental blunders of all time, if you think about it.
We have no evidence of a conspiracy by the CIA to engage in encouraging drug traffickers in Nicaragua or elsewhere in Latin America.
Deutsch was there because of the Gary Webb stories. The Gary Webb stories had sparked a national furor.
I would like to have Richie Ross's brother to speak, please.
The United States government turned their head and let this cocaine come into the United States of America.
Allow Gary Webb to have full access. This whole thing is orchestrated.
It was near pandemonium. It was about, I guess, 1,200 people in a standing room only in the auditorium, 2,000 people outside listening on loudspeakers. And it was very hard to keep control. I got called on finally, and I said to her very clearly, I was looking right at Deutsch.
I am a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, and I work South Central Los Angeles, and I will tell you, Director Deutsch, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
I was able to name operations.
Director Deutsch, I will refer you to 3 specific agency operations known as Amadeus, Pegasus, and Watchtower. I have Watchtower documents heavily redacted by the agency. I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s to become involved in protecting agency drug operations in this country.
He stumbled and stammered and wrung his hands.
If you have information about CIA illegal activity in drugs, you should immediately bring that information to wherever you want, but let me suggest 3 places. The Los Angeles Police Department.
And of course my response was, I started there 18 years ago, sir, and they tried to kill me. Now what do you want me to do?
If this information turns up wrongdoing, we will bring the people to justice and make them accountable.
The crowd started chanting, "We told you, we told you, we told you." And it was a great moment of unity. And it was a healing moment for me, because I'd been out alone for 18 years and didn't really know that kind of support was there for me either. The average person in South Central Los Angeles did not know anything about really how the CIA worked. They had an intuitive sense.
That you have a private network run by George Bush and Ollie North, not the CIA. You won't find the records in the CIA. They're not there. They're in these privatized intelligence agencies. Will you pursue that? Will you pursue Ollie North and George Bush and the massive documentation? All these gentlemen, like this gentleman here, the co-defendant of Ricky Ross.
They needed the money to finance the war in Nicaragua. They had the link. We know that from records now that they sent Blandone, who was a CIA operative, CIA, to school for marketing the product which we now know is cocaine.
Me and Ricky Ross is waiting to get sentenced Tuesday.
And she what a judge gonna say to us come Tuesday?
May I just say that the question which was asked of us by the judge was Ricky Ross ever an agent or a contract employee?
I already knew that from the beginning of dealing with Danilo Blandón that he was sending supplies and things of that nature, computers and guns to Nicaragua to fight a war.
Ricky had already served a 5.5-year sentence for dealing crack, but was now given a second 20-year sentence after being set up by his former partner Blandón, while Oliver North walked away as a hero, wealthy and free to try his hand at politics.
Oliver North was being promoted by the Christian Coalition, and to them he was the last white hope that they were going to have for a right-wing Christian to run for U.S. Senate in Virginia.
During the 1986 Kerry Commission, Oliver North's crimes were exposed to the American public, and yet today Oliver North is not only a free man, he has his own show on the Fox News network.
It's amazing that Oliver North has his own TV show, and hopefully when I get out, I plan on having my own.
How does a federal agency like the CIA exert control over local law enforcement agencies?
The way it's done, which I saw firsthand at LAPD, there are networks called the Narcotics Intelligence Network, or now it's called Clearinghouse, where agencies who are doing a drug case don't step on each other's toes.
Every time the police go and raid us, I know Rick used to get calls and say, move out, you know, they coming.
We actually saw that here in 1986 with major task force investigations of Freeway Ricky Ross. They had search warrants for 19 locations that were prepared one night, and by the time they got there the next morning, all 16 locations had been cleared out. And that means that obviously there was a leak. That's the way the CIA protects its share of the drug trade.
Just one night, I got a tip from Danilo not to go over, and just so happened to be the night that they raided.
Crack use spread like wildfire in the early 1980s. And in Los Angeles, a drug dealer known as Freeway Ricky Ross was in the middle of it. Prosecutors called Ross the Walmart of crack. He made millions in the early 80s dealing to Los Angeles street gangs.
The United States sentencing guidelines and the federal sentencing system rewards those who get others involved in criminal conduct, and that's what Blandón did.
During the exact same period that Freeway Ricky Ross was at his heyday, home values in South Central Los Angeles were tanking. People owed $100,000 on their home. The place was a war zone, dead bodies in the backyard, prostitutes in the front, drive-by shooting. I mean, it was horrible. And people walked on their mortgages because they couldn't sell the houses. And tens of thousands of homes were moved literally for 10 and 20 cents on the dollar after people abandoned their mortgages. We call that ethnic cleansing.
There was a greater plan to put churches, to put liquor stores, gun shops, and cocaine, drugs, into the ghetto, into the neighborhoods, and drive the prices down. And they pretty much did a good job of that.
Real estate in California, which we considered Compton, Watts, East LA, South Central, where the drug-infested gang killing highest rates in the country, and families really start moving out of the inner cities to way out. I'm talking about 70 miles out of LA to get rid of. I'm talking about the farmland where they promising people that they're gonna build up jobs and everything. Especially like in the 80s. There's a big thing about moving to Moreno Valley. We're gonna have all these big corporations come in. It never happened. People actually moved out there, end up losing everything because the big corporations never came. And then a lot of investors came back here and started buying property for so cheap prices. And now the property value is sky high. You can't even afford to live in Compton and Washington more without spending $300,000 for a home that my mother then paid $9,000 for.
I think the prevailing view on Wall Street is anyone stupid enough to buy drugs deserves to die. And if you can make money from them while they're doing it, that's great. And if that's imposing a crime wave on a community away from Wall Street, that's okay. There's no drug crime on Wall Street.
They pay cash, right? They pay cash.
One of the important facets of the discussion should be
what I call conspiracy theories. There are lots of folks out there, and there are books written on this by people who are in a position to know. Former DEA agents, former CIA operatives, things like that. And they tell stories about huge amounts of money, large-scale corruption in the big parts of government, etc. And are these stories true? And the answer is, of course, I don't know. I don't have access to any particular information more than anyone else does. However, ask yourself this question. If you're going to have $1 million in cash, how much corruption can you buy at any level for that $1 million? And the answer has to be quite a bit.
On December 10th, 2004, investigative journalist Gary Webb was found shot in his apartment.
Nah, you lying.
No.
When?
Saturday.
Oh, man.
The internet was set ablaze with conspiracies of a CIA assassination plot, but overwhelming evidence of a suicide soon put the theories to rest.
Well, he used to tell me that he would come home at night and there'd be guys, you know, climbing up the pole late at night, 12 and 1 o'clock, and you know, at nighttime, and people following him around everywhere he goes. He has cars telling him, and his phone was tapped, and he was just saying that they were kind of like giving him the blues. You know, a lot of things were going on that he didn't really like. And he said it was the government, too.
By the way, the head of the DEA, his name is Rob Bonner, is a friend of mine throughout the first George Bush administration, documented that yes, the CIA was involved with importation of a fair amount of cocaine with regard to the Iran-Contra, etc. But it just has to happen because of the money.
We understand what you're saying. A ton of cocaine was smuggled into the United States of America.
Well,
in cooperation with the CIA?
That's exactly what appears to have happened. When I was a clandestine case officer, I thought I was doing God's work, the nation's work, by recruiting traitors in varied countries around the world. And what I didn't realize was that I was literally there for show. I was just going through the motions because the traitors weren't producing really useful information. We were ignoring all of the openly available information that would have produced much richer results. Let's jump over to General Manuel Noriega in Panama. General Noriega was told by Bill Casey, then director of the Central Intelligence Agency, that he could have a free run with drugs into America, provided that he allowed us to support the Contras from Panama. That was a straight-up deal.
Now, I don't understand why the government didn't use Freeway Rick the way they used him. Set him up to go buy it from the big man and bust the big man. They know he ain't the big man. Somebody's bringing it to him.
Yeah, nobody's
So
the
why
big
they
man.
didn't reverse
They always take you almost
to make it seem like he's the man.
They never
But
found
somebody's
the man.
just bringing it to him.
Who is the real drug lord?
What do you say to the conspiracy theorists? Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the book called Dark Alliance, written about the CIA bringing in cocaine into South Central LA, and the whole Ricky Ross story.
Well, you know, I've been working with the CIA for years. I take great pride in what they do. They're very disciplined people of great courage. There aren't many of them. It's a very small agency. They're out there in the global context trying to protect the American people. So I think they deserve to be treated with respect. But the notion that they're smuggling drugs into America is just absurd.
I think Ricky Ross simply didn't invest enough money in bribing local authorities. Had he invested in a protection insurance policy at the state and local level through legal fronts, I mean, there are all kinds of lawyers that are willing to sell their souls and happy to take their money and then channel it into bribes. So basically, I think Ricky Ross didn't realize that he could become a pawn in the war on drugs.
Are you aware of whether or not narcotics proceeds at some time may or may not have supported Contra efforts?
Yes, sir. Narcotics proceeds were used to shore up the Contra effort.
Okay. Did you personally play a role in some of the transfer of that money?
Yes, I did.
6 months after CIA Director John Deutsch came to Locke High School, the residents of Watts were hardly surprised that the CIA found itself innocent of all drug-dealing charges. Today, Ricky Ross remains in prison as the sole perpetrator of America's biggest drug war scandal.
And this was an off-the-books operation. It was an operation that was specifically forbidden by the U.S. Congress, and drugs were used, together with Saudi Arabian contributions, also off the books. Drugs were used by the CIA to carry out a covert action that had been forbidden by Congress.
When Bush Sr. lost the election to Bill Clinton, everyone felt as if a new day were born in America. Now the peaceful liberals would rule, and the tired, corrupt Iran-Contra Reagan crew would be gone for good. Nick and Norm were brought to us by the Office of National Drug Control Policy, also known as the Office of the Drug Czar. Under Bill Clinton, the office was headed up by four-star General Drug Czar Barry McCaffrey.
Clinton had a drug czar by the name of Barry McCaffrey. And what he did, he was the evil one. Now, Clinton was the good one. Everybody loved Clinton. He played the sax, and, you know, he said he didn't inhale, and, you know, he got the BJ from the broad and everything. And everybody, he was
Black baby.
Yeah, Clinton was the man.
Less than a mile away from T's place, former President Clinton made an appearance to promote his new book. So many adoring fans showed up that Clinton was not able to sign everyone's copy.
Problems today with President Clinton's book signing tour through the Southland. He appeared at SO1 Books in Baldwin Village.
I'm all the way from Moreno Valley just to see President Clinton. I love him and I love what he stands for.
But in actuality, he had this evil, crazy, maniacal person that headed up the war on drugs. Now that's the good guy getting the bad guy to do the bad work.
Yes, they all.
Scapegoat.
It's scapegoat.
That's
That's
all
what
it
we
is.
was talking about earlier. The scapegoat. Like we're the scapegoat. They all got to have an scapegoat.
Back in Austin, General Barry McCaffrey was making an appearance at a fundraising event. The former drug czar was now a regular war correspondent on MSNBC, but he would never knowingly participate in some independent film with a questionable message. Maybe by accident, I told the General Secretary that I was working on an anti-drug video, which is kind of true. So I donned my Republican disguise, consisting of a golf shirt, name tag, and slacks. Carefully choosing the correct forks and nibbling on some asparagus, I waited for the perfect moment to approach the well-protected former drug czar.
Mostly known as a drug czar, and if I talk to the media or talk to the American people, that's the only way they'd recognize what I was doing.
In the early 90s, my friends were all quitting the 80s hard drugs and switching to high-quality marijuana. A guy I knew always had pounds of hydroponic, the kind of pot you see on the cover of High Times magazine. It wasn't long until the law caught up with him and he was sent to a prison work camp. Mambo died a few years later. Turns out that this was becoming a rather common story because during McCaffrey's reign under Bill Clinton, literally millions of nonviolent pot smokers were arrested and sentenced. And even if you still don't recognize Barry, everyone remembers Barry's classic "This is your egg brain on drugs" anti-drug campaign.
Metaphor of the drug war led to flawed thinking.
I was invited a few years ago when General McCaffrey was the drug czar to be involved in a debate. He bragged with a smile on his face that the budget for his office, namely the Office of National Drug Control Policy, was getting an increase in funding from $17 billion per year to something like $18.5 billion per year. Can you imagine how much money that is?
You go to children and you say, do you remember your mom, dad, coach, teacher saying marijuana is unacceptable? If I remember hearing that, I'm not using drugs. You know, we have actually done a terrific job in the United States reducing drug abuse. It's down from 14% of the population past month to 7%.
And if you expect somebody that controls that much money to be in favor of change, look again. Of course not, because money is power.
Our problem isn't that we use too many drugs. Our problem is we've got too much money.
Most people today cannot even tell you the name of our current drug czar who works under the Bush administration.
We want to expand drug treatment courts that find people who are in trouble with the law because of their addiction and give them an opportunity to not just to pay their debt to society, but to get clean and sober.
Our viewpoint and our funding was to enhance prevention and education.
All of the drug czars since McCaffrey, or since Bill Bennett, who was the first one under these circumstances, they all do the same thing, they all talk the same way, they all give lip service to drug treatment, but when it comes down to it and the rubber meets the road, the only money that is spent is for incarceration.
The reason why we don't hear about the drug czar, and by the way, the drug czar is the son of General Vernon Walters, who was a great CIA hand during Iran-Contra, a great CIA player. John Walters is his name. We don't hear about it now because the drug business is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. The drug money is flowing, people are going to jail, the money's going through Wall Street, people are happy, it's not out of control, and everybody's looking the other way. And that's exactly the way they need it to be, because they cannot sustain not only the U.S. economy, but they cannot sustain the U.S. empire, the American empire, without those drug flows.
Everybody is out to grab money. Everybody is trying to make money off the drug war on the good side. And of course, unspoken on the bad side, the people that use drugs and sell drugs, they're trying to make money.
The ruling class here in America had to come up with something so that they could control certain segments of society so that they could stay in power. So they created the drug war for the felonization of Americans.
So the drug war has actually established a false capitalist economy there that's driven by the money you throw at it. The more money you throw at it, the wilder it gets.
Back in the 70s, Joe Pietri was a large-scale marijuana and hashish smuggler working in Nepal. When Nixon started the drug war, he gave over $50 million to the government of Nepal to outlaw marijuana and hashish. Joe witnessed firsthand how a once peaceful Nepal quickly transformed into a society of heroin addicts controlled by a violent black market.
I was in the marijuana and hashish business for 25 years. I spent 25 years of my life living in Southeast and Southwest Asia, where I saw the CIA, through their political agendas, allow the production of opium poppies and heroin production in Southwest and Southeast Asia that eventually reached these shores.
Why do you think heroin use has gone up so much?
Well, I don't think heroin use has gone up.
Heroin is increasing. I just stopped. You guys going to keep quiet, or I have to go do this?
Back on the streets of LA, dealers use little balloons to sell small amounts of heroin. Sergeant Daigle points out balloons on the street that gets cleaned every few days. When I looked up, I realized I was standing on literally thousands of empty balloons as far as I could see.
You can look on the ground and you can see a little water, little pure water that's given out. They're all little balloons. You'll see them all over there. They're as common as the cigarette butts. That's all heroin balloons.
My wife and I had hired a young woman to help around the house. Soon I started finding burnt, bent spoons hidden in strange places. Jonna played in a punk band, and as I learned back in the 80s, music and drugs go hand in hand.
Well, you know, you just think like, oh, Iggy Pop, Kurt Cobain, you know, they use heroin, maybe I'll be able to write better songs, you know, I mean, especially like, I think people who are into art and shit, there's more of a draw towards drugs just because you want to experience different states of your mind, you know. I mean, right now, it's easiest for me to get heroin is walking into a gas station and buying a pack of cigarettes, you know.
The amount of heroin reaching U.S. shores seems to come in cycles, but nothing in past history can compare to the influx experienced in the wake of the new war on terror.
It's very important for the American taxpayer to understand that Afghanistan was producing virtually no heroin under the Taliban and is now responsible for 80% of the heroin coming to the United States and the Western countries.
Now, we invaded Afghanistan right after 9/11, secured the country in November. Just by coincidence, the planting season for the opium poppy is November, and you harvest in late May and early June.
Former DEA agent Celerino Castillo served in the DEA, where he helped to eradicate vast poppy fields.
When the Taliban was in Afghanistan. They were what they were, but they were definitely against opium crops cultivation, and a lot of it was destroyed.
We secured the country just in time to release a whole bunch of opium warlords from prison. It was in the news.
Well, drug money could soon be funding Al-Qaeda and other terror groups.
These beautiful-looking flowers are fueling some ugly addiction and terrorism.
When you've taught everybody how to make money with hard drugs, what are they supposed to do? Stop?
Police don't bother them. The U.S. military has other priorities.
So within this past year that the U.S. government has control of Afghanistan, why is there a major crop of heroin that's going to be coming into the U.S. or has come into the U.S.?
We see a lot of people from Northern California, a lot of young male and female white couples. They actually come down here on vacation if they're heroin users, because heroin is so readily available down here in downtown LA. But it's just so it's inexpensive. It's good quality. It's it typically comes in from the harbor, right down in the Harbor Division, LAPD. It's shipped in from overseas, comes in on cargo ships, things like that. But it's just readily available.
Afghanistan stands on the brink of becoming a narco-terror state.
This drug money funds terror. It's a ploy.
Ploy. You know, I support the troops, but I don't support my government because our government has lied to us. Those people at Homeland Security were all brought in to fight the so-called war on drugs. When they realized that it failed, they went into terrorism, and now they're trying to combine both of them by saying, if you support drug trafficking or if you sell a dime bag at a corner, that means you are now supporting terrorism, which is another lie to the American people.
The Patriot Act defends our liberty, is what it does, under the Constitution of the United States.
Did I say that?
We didn't need the Patriot Act to have prevented 9/11, and yet the Patriot Act was already pretty much written before 9/11 even happened. It was on the books within weeks, and normally that process takes months to draft that kind of legislation.
You know, isn't it the ultimate irony that perhaps the modern-day Al Capone, Osama bin Laden, exists because of potentially the fact that he is a drug kingpin? Don't people see this? People are never going to do away with the marketplace for drugs, but that in fact it's prohibition that may have led to the actual bombing, the actual destruction of the Twin Towers in New York.
Bin Laden didn't blow up the Twin Towers because he just didn't like Americans. It was about money. Some type of way Bush got into making money and cut him off.
We support 44 dictators. We support drugs. We support the president of Afghanistan, whose brother is the biggest drug lord in Afghanistan. We support the president of Pakistan, who is the one who profits.
If you quit drugs, you join the fight against terror in America.
When you have a government that promotes drugs to get their agendas across in Central America and South America, in Southeast Asia and Southwest Asia, and then puts its own people in jail for using them, are you really living in a free country?
I've had two sitting congressmen tell me this. Jim, you're right. Most people in Washington realize that the war on drugs is not winnable, but it's eminently fundable. And people in government bureaucracy are addicted to the drug war funding.
It never ceases to amaze me that anyone shopping for groceries will have the choice to buy hard liquor and cigarettes along with the milk and bread. Not that I have anything against those things, but in the 90s, it was the legal substances of alcohol, tobacco, and pharmaceutical drugs that affected my life forever. In 1994, at age 32, my close friend passed away from pancreatic cancer. He had been 5 years sober, religiously attending AA meetings. Although cancer runs in his family, it will always be my opinion that the non-stop chain smoking played a major role in his sickness.
So although 10,000 people died last year from their use of cocaine and heroin, it's estimated that 450,000 died from their use of tobacco.
A few years later, at age 47, my brother Kurt suffered a seizure caused by years and years of taking legal pharmaceutical medications used to control his schizophrenia.
It's estimated that 100,000 people died last year from their use of legal prescription drugs.
My mom, who had battled diabetes for many years, started drinking harder after Kurt's death. And even after surviving an almost complete liver failure, was still unable to quit drinking and lost her life in 2001. And not long after my mom's passing, my dad's drinking finally caught up to him. But luckily for my dad, he told me that the dialysis machine allowed him to drink way more than ever because of how it filtered the alcohol.
It's estimated that 150,000 people died last year from their use of alcohol. And I'm not talking now about drinking and driving. I'm talking about just the health consequence of drinking. I'm sure that there are a few people that died last year from their use of marijuana, but there are no documented deaths as a result of people smoking marijuana.
Perhaps the most absurd aspect of the drug war is the continuing battle over the legalization of medical marijuana.
And they're trying like crazy to come up with pills to help with chemotherapy and HIV. I mean, these are serious illnesses.
For cancer survivor Todd McCormick, the right to use medical marijuana has been a lifelong struggle. Todd spent 5 years in the Victorville prison in a cell coincidentally right next to Freeway Ricky Ross. Todd was not caught selling marijuana. He was arrested for giving it away for free to dying people who were not able to afford it.
When I was 2 years old, I was diagnosed with histiocytosis X. I suffered through 10 major lesions of these histiocytites between the ages of 2 and 10, and I started using cannabis to effectively treat the nausea and the side effects.
As insignificant as it may seem to most people, this controversy cuts to the very core of our constitutional right to consume any drug prescribed by a doctor.
You know, cancer, AIDS, you know, and they still, all this cancer research, they haven't come up with anything that even compares to what marijuana does.
Many argue there's little evidence that marijuana has medical value.
It's a handful of people who want to see not just marijuana, but all drugs legalized. A drug, of course they feel good. That's why they take a drug. Does that mean it's medicine? Does that mean that it cures the situation? No, it doesn't.
Why is our government spending billions of our tax dollars every year to stop people from growing a plant that helps the side effects of chemotherapy?
You're looking at pharmaceuticals. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. But if you look at all the pain medications, all of the drugs that we use, probably 80% of them could be eliminated by people using cannabis.
Meet Dr. Claudia Jensen. She might look like a soccer mom and most certainly does not get high. But when it comes to giving her patients what she believes to be the best medicine available, she is not afraid of the bullies in Washington who fight so hard to protect their interests.
You even testified before Congress a few weeks ago on the use of medical marijuana. What led you to the conclusion that this is a viable treatment for this disorder?
Well, that's what patients reported to me, so I listened to them.
Marijuana doesn't kill your liver, doesn't damage your kidneys, doesn't cause ulcers. It can increase risk of respiratory problems, bronchitis, and pneumonia. The risk of cancer is not significantly different, very minimal increase in risk for cancer. It just generally does not have a death profile.
As they say, life imitates art, as I received word that my dad had been diagnosed with throat cancer. I had never even seen my dad smoke, but his 40-year-old two-pack-a-day habit reared its ugly head. Ironic, because he drank enough Smirnoff vodka to drown a Russian battalion, but now his life was threatened by something we'd never expected. I mean, my mom and dad voted for Nixon, and they were happy about it even after Watergate. We're proud that they voted for Nixon. They voted for Reagan. They voted for Bush 1, voted for Bush 2. You know, I mean, when I bring up marijuana to my dad, he just rolls his eyes, you know, while he's sitting there drinking his Smirnoff.
Getting through to someone like your father is, to me, I mean, something that almost he would have to experience on his own. I mean, until the barricades that he set up mentally come down, and he wants to open his mind to what you're bringing him with this information.
Everything in our bodies is regulated by marijuana-like compounds that our bodies produce. So whether you're talking about the immune system, the nervous system, the digestive system, reproductive system, endocrine system, all of these coordinated body functions are regulated in a homeostatic manner by cannabinoids.
In Southern California, you need not drive far to find a medical marijuana dispensary, but because of the continuing tenuous laws, the DEA still performs random busts. It was not easy, but my friend Joe Rogan of Fear Factor was able to convince them that I could be trusted and gained our camera some access.
Well, what we try to do when members come in here is that we try to give them an introduction as to what is available.
Paul Scott runs a dispensary and knows all too well the risks he faced for doing so. But Paul has AIDS and remembers the sacrifices made by the people before him.
My friends were dying. Brain cancer, you know, it was the people early on who were dying. And most people who helped start that Oakland Cannabis Club are dead. Something that could alleviate the nausea, something that if you're in the house and you're light sensitive because of the side effects, you can at least desire something to eat.
For somebody that's older and, well, there's no way they're going to smoke some marijuana with you, you know. Put it in a little brownie and or a little chocolate chip cookie or something that they like, and let them eat it and let them discover the effects of it in a sense on their own.
Again, these are the different delivery methods of being able to eat the cannabis without smoking it. So if the grandfather who's at home, nauseated and in bed and on eating, there is something that you're able to give them that's well tolerated and that will be on beneficial side effects of eating and feeling just a little bit better that day.
Big business does not want us to know that we can cure cancer forever at very low cost.
Dear old Donnie Rumsfeld, you know, our chief torturer, chief liar on 9/11, one of the chief liars, was the CEO of Searle Pharmaceuticals. Why would the pharmaceutical companies want you to be able to grow a plant in your backyard that might cure your menstrual cramps, might solve your headache, might give a terminally ill cancer patient, you know, some chance at gaining some weight and having a tiny quality of life? If you can grow that in your backyard, there's no net profit for corporations, and we already know what net profit means to stock prices.
10 states have passed laws permitting the use of medical marijuana, but today the court ruled that the federal ban on marijuana supersedes those state laws. Polling has shown that a large majority of Americans consistently support the use of medical marijuana. Still, in a 6-3 decision, the justices said that federal authorities may prosecute sick people who use marijuana, even if it's at the direction of a doctor.
Here we are in the modern world where sick people of all colors fear incarceration because of the medicine they use. Is their plight helped or hurt by what I consider to be the most honest of all pot smokers? People who just want to get high.
So awesome. I was tobacco. Hello, NBC.
Nobody's here for any joint. That's a guard. Nobody is here for one joint. I will guarantee you, you're not here for one marijuana cigarette because the law says you have to do it at least 3 times. At least 3 times to even be prosecuted. So you are not here. You're the one that said that? Who said that? You did.
I was here for just a joint.
No, you said it. Now, you are lying. You are not here from one marijuana cigarette. What's your name?
I'm here for a couple of
Well, I'm gonna tell you. So this is garbage, and you shouldn't lie to the sheriff.
Smoke weed every day, yeah.
Okay, but then why'd you go down?
Now, this is my first time using drugs, so are you supposed to inhale?
Back in the hood, we were joined by T. Rogers' son, Lucky, who informed us that it was time for us to take a little test to make sure we were not undercover narcs.
Well, I found me a bag of bud outside. I'm grateful for it. and I'm about to smoke it. You can't return it to the lost and found, right? I mean, what would you do if you found a bag of weed? Smoke it. Goddamn right. What you gonna say? Man, I found a bag of weed, I don't know what to do. Well, I know. We're about to, we is about to smoke. I just found this, Mama.
Almost everyone I know, including myself, has tried smoking marijuana at least once. So why does our government classify marijuana right alongside of drugs like crack and crystal meth, when its effects are obviously so different?
Marijuana is the single biggest cause of treatment need in this country by far. The problem that we face is it's more than twice as important a factor in the treatment need of the country than any of the illegal drugs. And for teenagers, it's more important a factor than alcohol today, which never used to be the case.
The people in Washington realize that 85% of all people in the United States of America today that use any form of illicit drug use only marijuana. That means that the total numbers of everybody else that uses any other drug would not justify this colossal prison industrial complex, this colossal bureaucracy that we have to fight the war on drugs.
We are not going to arrest basically the backbone, the fabric of America today. You got 80 million Americans who have tried or used marijuana. We're talking about doctors, lawyers, judges, scientists, entrepreneurs, athletes. We're talking about the backbone of America, the marrow of America that does smoke or has smoked marijuana.
Marijuana is Schedule 1. Do you think marijuana belongs in Schedule 1?
I'm not sure what the politics of that is, to be honest with you.
What about countries like Amsterdam, where they have not so much legalized, but they've decriminalized, and they claim that it's helped crime and that it's helped addiction?
Amsterdam, when I've been there, you have to cross over bodies lying on the street because they're high on drugs. They're just lying on the corner. You have to jump over them when you want to go somewhere.
Less than a week after baking in the sun at Sheriff Joe's tent city, I decided to take a quick trip to see if he was being 100% honest about the effects of Dutch drug laws on the streets of Amsterdam. When I arrived, I was joined by a friend of a friend who had grown up in Amsterdam and knew the streets like the back of his hand. Yes, we did see drug dealers, but they were extremely polite and always backed away after realizing I was not looking for drugs. And unlike Sheriff Joe, who was crossing over bodies, we ended up having to pay a dealer to introduce us to a single enthusiastic crack smoker.
This is crack, man. This is crack in Amsterdam. The crack.
Well, what do you think about the fact that you can do this on the streets here without being taken to
Because
prison?
we pay tax for use.
Yeah? What do you think about it? Like, what do you think about American drug laws as compared to these drug laws?
They are very harsh in America.
Yeah?
You can't even smoke a joint of marijuana.
Yeah, I know.
You get into problems, you know. Here, you get it. Coffee shops, that's why I don't understand why they can legalize this shit, you know.
Well, what do you think about the fact that in America, like, they're filling up the prisons with people that just want to do drugs?
It's not right. They gotta try another different approach, like taking care of the people, you know, who are addicted. They give them places to use the shit, and taking care of people who don't have a house to sleep. That's the way they do it here in Holland.
By total coincidence, we found ourselves at the 420 bar on April 20th. Unbeknownst to me, 420 is a very significant date in the worldwide pot-smoking community.
My name is Michael Veling. I'm the owner of this bar, Koen Coffee Shop, which means that you can drink a beer in here and you can also buy a bag of grass, if you so wish. I've had this place for 18 years, and I've never had a fight in here.
American comedian Tom Rhodes moved to Holland, where he became the Dutch equivalent of David Letterman.
Mr. Tom Rhodes.
People think that all drugs are legal there. It's not true. And actually, marijuana and hash is not legal. It's tolerated, as are mushrooms. All organic drugs are tolerated.
I don't have much to say about Dutch drug policy. Their model applied to the United States would be inappropriate, and we're not going to do it. We're not going to legalize drugs. Drugs are already decriminalized by and large in the United States.
What have they done in Holland? Well, they realize, of course, that the drugs are here to stay, and let's try to manage the problem. And they have put in a really effective harm reduction program.
You know, in Holland, they call people junkies who do anything too much. If you drink too much, you're considered a junkie. If you smoke too much weed, you're considered a junkie. Which, when I first moved over there and I heard people go, oh, he's a junkie, I always thought they were talking about heroin.
What has happened? Well, the Minister of Health of Holland held a press conference a few years ago saying, you know something? We have only half the marijuana usage in Holland as you do in your country, both for adults and for teenagers. He said, we have succeeded in Holland in making pot boring.
Holland has 60% the drug use is that of the United States, and that's among kids and adults, and that's for marijuana and harder drugs.
If you do weed and it leads to coke and then you do heroin, that's really the individual's own psycho problem.
In Amsterdam, people addicted to heroin need not resort to stealing or prostitution. The Rainbow is a free clinic that allows junkies to come in off the street for a fix of government-controlled heroin and a clean syringe.
Heroin addicts are pitied, and the government does the best they can to try and get them off heroin. Like, last year in the papers, Dutch doctors said that they think they should be treating heroin addicts with heroin instead of methadone and morphine because they think that just makes the addicts addicted to those things.
Methadone withdrawal is like 5 times as long as heroin withdrawal. I guess also the point of methadone is to, like, you know, get yourself out of the hole.
I don't support that all drugs should be legal. You know, I don't think heroin should be legal. I think it ruins people's lives. And I've seen cocaine ruin a lot of people's lives and turn good people into total assholes. I think that the organic basis for the drug law that Holland has, and, you know, and their entire system isn't right, you know, but, you know, the fact that, you know, mushrooms and marijuana and hash, you know, it comes from the earth, so they've got more of a Christian idea of creation and what is supposed to be used to help us get along in this little journey.
The Dutch drug policy is very successful. If you compare the statistics of this country and you compare them to other countries where there's a much less lenient policy on drugs, you would be surprised to find out that Holland has very low figures.
Amsterdam is not legal, it's semi-legal. When you go into a coffee house, you can smoke a couple of marijuana cigarettes or hashish, but it's still against the law to sell it and to have large quantities. But it doesn't work. The English system has never worked. You should never, never legalize drugs.
Okay, Kevin, we're gonna hit it. Hit it, take it off.
I remember it wasn't long after looking down my nose at Jonna for her heroin addiction that I found myself addicted to prescription pain pills. A series of childhood accidents from motocross, gymnastics, and high diving had left me with a compressed disc in my lower spine. Now my biggest nightmare of all time had become true. Not only was I an addict, but I had something in common with Rush Limbaugh. Life can be cruel. The joke was really on me when I learned that quitting Vicodin and OxyContin could actually be harder than quitting heroin due to the high precision of synthetic opiates.
Rush Limbaugh, as far as I'm concerned, he's a victim. He's a victim of this of the drug war, because he got hurt. He got addicted to OxyContin, which is like heroin. Apparently, it's harder to get off than heroin, and he got so addicted that he had to go illegal. But Rush, personally, I have compassion for him, and I feel sorry for him, and I would like to turn him on to pot. You know, if he needs something to mellow out, you know, smoke a joint, Rush. That's my prescription to you.
Most people don't realize this, but CIA has the highest alcoholism, adultery, divorce, and suicide rates, other than the post office. Most people at CIA drink too much. And I know for a fact that there are people at CIA that smoke marijuana. And they're just hoping they won't get caught on their next lie detector test. Marijuana is, like alcohol, something that people want to use. And I have no problem with it as long as they're not driving a car.
Ask yourself, what would happen if the United States of America or California or any of our states were to treat marijuana like alcohol?
This right here is 1/4 ounce bag of the Jack Herer.
And the answer is 3 things would happen right away. All of them would be good. The first thing, and I'm in California so I can talk about my native state. The first thing is that the taxpayers of California would save about $1 billion that they spend in 1 year alone to try to eradicate marijuana and prosecute and incarcerate nonviolent marijuana users.
Just some awesome weed, man.
And by the way, marijuana is the largest cash crop in the state of California today, even though it is illegal. So you can tell how successful we are at that. Number 2 is grapes, by the way, if you care. The second thing that would happen is we could tax the stupid stuff and generate revenue of at least $1.5 billion every year just by the tax base.
Not cheap.
Now, already we have a change in our budget deficit in California alone for a year of about $2.5 billion. Imagine what we could do with that money. And the third thing, it seems to me, trumps the first 2. The third thing is we would make marijuana less available for our children than it is today. Why? Because the alcohol is regulated and controlled by the government, and illegal drug dealers, illegal marijuana dealers, control the sale of marijuana. And as a result, they don't ask for ID.
I think if you wanted to start to do this, and that's why the DEA has fought it so hard, you would start by legalizing medical marijuana across the board. But you've seen how hard DEA has fought. They'll stop shipments of birdseed coming across the Canadian border that don't even have any THC content or can't get you high, can't grow any plants. And they will fight that tooth and nail because that's how flimsy the facade of the drug war is.
If you want to come home to your home, smoke marijuana, then that's your business. That's not the government's business. Our government has always told us it's addicted and, you know, and so forth, but marijuana has been around for many, many, many years and has never killed anybody.
What's your opinions about medical marijuana?
Well, that's a tough one. Tough one. If it's issued by tight controls by a physician, I don't know if I oppose that. If someone's dying of cancer, and that's going to help that person, I don't know if I'm strictly opposed to medical marijuana you're probably talking about. It can help the dying patient, but it has to be dispensed by a doctor, just like codeine and other drugs. Doctors dispense other drugs.
So the secret through all of this, I've been doing this for a lot of years, the secret boils down to one thing. Prohibition never works as well as regulation and control. Let me say that again. Prohibition never works as well as regulation and control. That doesn't mean that we abandon our children to cocaine use or marijuana use or anything else, but as soon as you prohibit something, you give up all control. And now the only people in control are the illegal drug sellers, and they do want your 14-year-old daughter to get hooked on cocaine.
Before, when you went to buy marijuana, you didn't find cocaine or heroin there. You didn't see guns. It wasn't a violent scene. That's why it was easy to catch us.
Due to the lack of profit potential, another category of naturally occurring drugs is rarely discussed when debating the drug war.
I just wonder what your opinions are about the use of the ritualistic drugs.
It's a question I rush to avoid. It's, and I don't mean to be critical, but it's such a tiny, silly thing. It's almost not worth commenting on.
The Native Americans have had to fight long and hard for the use of peyote for their religious practice. Shamanism is the oldest religion in the world, and the war on drugs directly imposes itself upon our religious freedom and in fact, what is the oldest religion known to humankind.
Tribal members report a reduced rate in alcoholism, gambling addiction, and even drug addiction for those who go through the ancient hallucinogenic rituals.
We try to keep
our young people from using alcohol and drugs through these ceremonies and telling them, you know, showing them the way of life that we're supposed to be living.
I think probably if there was a claim that, you know, that these kind of drugs actually help deal with alcohol abuse, that's probably silly. We had to get our treatment protocols from NIDA, not from malarkey.
Thousands of years of ancient tribal tradition now boiled down into one word.
Malarkey.
Known for being the man who introduced Timothy Leary to LSD, Dr. Gary Fisher believes that the drug war and religious suppression are one and the same.
The psychedelic drugs have been used through time in very positive ways, and they do not present a threat to anybody except the power establishment.
After getting word that my father's condition had taken a turn for the worse, I spoke with a doctor who uses hallucinogenic drugs in order to prepare terminally ill people for the inevitable transition.
In terms of the hallucinogens per se, my interest rests primarily in their potential application as a medical psychiatric treatment, and I believe that they're particularly valuable for patient populations that do not respond well to conventional treatments.
Diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, one would be hard-pressed to accuse Pam Sakuda of only wanting to get high.
The people who are waging the war on drugs have every interest in continuing to do so, because especially medicines like hallucinogens. And I think we all agree in these discussions that what they do is they allow you to change your perspective and to think outside of the box that you're closed into. And that's the last thing that this power structure wants, is for you to think outside of the box. In fact, they'd rather make your box smaller.
But here's an opportunity to have a truly religious experience, not hearing about religion, but to have that primal experience. Of course, your dad and his condition and all of his mindset, his rigidity would be highly unlikely to accept that.
The truth is, a sick person, a patient who is ill, should have the right to use anything that they can use that will help relieve their pain and suffering.
Because of my father's beliefs and the laws in Texas, I'll never know if naturally occurring drugs could have helped him through the most painful experience in his life. And in the end, like most Americans, he put his faith in Western medicine and lost his battle with cancer. My father lived an amazing life. He started with nothing and tirelessly worked his way to the top. And even though I didn't agree with his drinking, it was the way he chose to live. As far back as I can remember, my parents, like the rest of the World War II generation, all drank lots of hard liquor. Our country's psyche seems to be one fueled by alcohol, so it only makes sense that the drug war is against anything that threatens alcohol or tobacco.
When alcohol prohibition ended, it empowered a new group of entrepreneurs, you know, the liquor industry. The tobacco industry has done a phenomenal job of jumping into the FDA and exempting its product from every single law that would have caused it to get off the shelf.
All my brothers, all them dead, my mom and dad, ain't everybody. Yeah, I'm the only one left. They was a drinker. They died with cirrhosis of the liver.
Everybody likes to sin. Don't you like to sin?
Yeah, all the time. I don't know.
Okay.
I never call that a difficult lifestyle. I just call
it depends on how much sinning you do, Pilgrim.
Ever since my friend Bill died, I had done my fair share of consuming various substances. I thought I had escaped the addictive traits of my family, but for me the hook came in the form of pain pills. Not being able to afford rehab, while searching the internet, I found a new drug treatment that breaks the addiction to opium. It seems like being addicted is punishment enough. I can't even begin to imagine having the law involved.
I mean, how many people have you known in your life now whose lives have been affected directly by the drug war?
Many, 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 many people. Good people, good talented people.
It makes as much sense to me to put this gifted actor Robert Downey Jr. in jail for his cocaine problem, and regretfully he certainly seems to have one, as it would have Betty Ford in jail for her alcohol problem. It's the same thing. But If Betty Ford or Robert Downey Jr. or you or I drive a motor vehicle while impaired by whatever drug you're talking about, be it marijuana, alcohol, cocaine, or whatever, that's a crime. Bring them to court. Bring them to people like me, and we will address their actions. That's an appropriate use of the criminal justice system.
The media and the drug war have a long symbiotic relationship. During the last several years, Freeway Ricky Ross's legend continued to grow. A platinum-selling rapper using the name Ricky Ross tells stories that glorify Rick's life as a drug dealer. Ricky even had his own hour-long BET special, once again proving how a war-weary country has become immune to complete government corruption. However, in late 2005, Ricky did catch a break and got his sentence reduced down to a few years.
Ricky Ross is really a good guy who took advantage of an opportunity. He was an entrepreneur, but he's at the bottom of the food chain, so he went to jail. All the guys that violated the law, that ignored congressional sanctions on Iran-Contra, they're all in power. And George Bush, a guy who never succeeded at anything and is certainly not succeeding at this presidency, a guy who stole 2 elections, who has committed at least 10 different impeachable offenses, he's president of the United States.
Go to court, you're basically facing an all-white jury, a white judge, a white prosecutor, white court reporter. So it's kind of like a white world. DA agents, they're all white. I mean, in my whole case, I don't think that I've had one black person other than the probation officer in my whole case. I think that the drug war is the last white hope. When you break it all down and you look at it from the ground. From a federal prison.
Look, I have come more than 180 degrees. I worked narcotics in South Central Los Angeles. Now I am completely and totally in favor of decriminalizing all drug use, period. Drug addiction, like alcohol addiction, is not a criminal problem. It's a medical problem, a social problem, a spiritual problem. Here we go.
But, you know, the money incentive behind the drug war is so great that, you know, to shut this big machine, that rehab machine, prison machine, felonization machine, this whole other, you know, thing that they have going down is going to take a real revolution.
But Emiliano Zapata once said, you know, I'd rather die on my feet than be living on my knees for the rest of my life.
The next big step is the people refusing to pay taxes or to re-elect people. In fact, I see 80 million Americans getting themselves organized to the point where they can tell Congress that if it doesn't dramatically reduce what we spend on a heavy metal military, on secret intelligence, on prisons, which are actually slave farms, then these people will be fired.
Are you ready for dinner?
Give me 2 waffles, 1 breast, 1 side order of grits.
Today's headlines solely focus on the war on terror, a war they say could last 100 years. But what does this mean for the future of the drug war?
The feds are listening. You're going down if you use this phone.
You should be much more afraid of First Data Corporation than of the CIA. It's private organizations that are cataloging everybody's information.
They don't need warrants now to tap your, well, they never did for cell phones, but they don't need warrants to tap a lot of your electronic communications, which are not secure.
I've been violated all my life, so it don't matter.
There goes the Fifth Amendment. There goes the Fifth Amendment and the Sixth Amendment. Somebody didn't like that.
Them coming out admitting it is just an admission of guilt. So Life goes on. Life goes on.
Back in Sheriff Joe's jail, the daily grind goes on. And in all honesty, as much as I wanted to hate Joe Arpaio, I was glad that some of the inmates I met were not living on my street.
March time, march!
80% of the cops shot in this area were shot because people are high on drugs. So we want to give drugs to everybody. Let them all shoot the cops.
Growing up during Nixon's drug war, I can't even imagine how life would be without this drug prohibition. I often wonder who in my family might still be alive had they used naturally occurring drugs for both their medical and recreational needs. The government claims that the future of illegal drug use is heading towards synthetics, such as prescription abuse and crystal meth. This man lives in the most drug-infested area of Amsterdam.
Much crystal meth here? No, I never heard about crystal meth. And what is it?
Speed.
Speed?
Yeah.
Okay.
In a place that has adopted a more Christian value towards organic substances that come from the earth, synthetic drugs like crystal meth are almost non-existent. Do you want your future to be this? Or to stay on a pathway that allows a greedy few to profit from the felonization of sick people?
It's a free-for-all on the street. Your kids can go and buy heroin and cocaine easier than they can get cigarettes and alcohol. So there has to be some control.
We're not going to legalize drugs. We're not going to do it. You know, we have actually done a terrific job in the United States reducing drug abuse. It's true.
No one talks about making cigarettes illegal. So they're not protecting people. They're not protecting society. I can drive stoned. I can't drive drunk. But alcohol's legal because I don't know how to make whiskey. Do you know how to make whiskey?
Okay, put your hands in my mouth. Turn over.
Okay, I'll take a bite.
Delicious. Tastes like weed.
If it wouldn't have been money in drugs, I never would have been involved. But for me, it was a way to get out of the ghetto. It was a way to have the American dream.
Well, my message to Ricky is, man, the world's great when you get out here, man. And, you know, just keep your head up. I miss you, man, and you're going to be okay. He's been fine all these years. I mean, Ricky's got a real good sense of self. I love him, man. I really love Ricky Ross. I think he is a great person.
Ricky Ross is doing George Bush's time.
Bass, pain, bass, jitter, blow. Get higher, baby.
Get higher, baby. It don't ever come down. Freebase.
What are your opinions about drugs like mushrooms and ecstasy?
I love mushrooms. Why, am I violating the law eating mushrooms?
Listen,
what the...
White lies, vision, dreams, and passion going through my mind. And all the while I think of you. Pipelines, a very strange reaction for us to unwind. The more I see, the more I do. Something of a phenomenon telling your body to come along. Because white lines blow away. Blow. Rock. Blow. Kick it by white line highway. Tell all your friends they can go my way. Pay your toll, sell your soul. Pound for pound costs more than gold. The longer you stay, the more you pay. My white lines go a long way. Either up your nose or to your vein. With nothing to gain except killing your brain. A million magic crystals, painted pure and white, in multi-million dollars. Almost overnight, some asshole took a picture of Kate Moss doing lines. Now she's being victimized for imaginary crimes. Please. Rock. Cane. Shooter. Blow. Cane. Face. Rock. Blow. Get higher, baby. Get higher, baby. Get higher, baby. It don't ever come down. Rank